Good evening, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for November 20th, Thursday, around 5:33 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. It was another cold day today. Highs around 40 or so, but felt a little colder. Tomorrow's going to go back in the 30s again. But next week we could have a little warm up. Looking ahead to Thanksgiving, it's going to be cold again. Highs on Thanksgiving Day will be 40. Some news to report. More snow coming to the Buffalo, New York area. And we're talking about feet of snow again. The Buffalo Sabres have called off their game against the New York Rangers because of the snow. And also Sunday's New York Jets versus Buffalo Bill game will not be played at Ralph Wilson Stadium because of the amounts of snow being outrageously ridiculous. There's some places that when it's all said and done could have 7-8 feet of snow combined from all of these lake effect snow. So it's amazing. I wonder if this is caused by global warming. Probably, but you don't know. And that's about it on that. My next subject is the New York Islanders dynasty from 1980 to 1983. The New York Islanders won 4 straight Stanley Cup championships, 16 playoff series wins in a row, and they were one of the best hockey teams ever assembled for 4 straight Stanley Cup championships. The background on the Islanders came into the National Hockey League in 1972, and for the first couple of years they were one of the worst teams in the league. But when they were the worst teams of the league, they got one of the best players, a cornerstone of their franchise, defenseman Dennis Potvin, who people were saying he was the next Bobby Orr. And also they got some other players like Billy Smith. They got goaltender from the expansion draft in 1972 and a couple of other pieces like Clark Gillies and Brian Trottier and Mike Bossy. And they were moving up on the standings in 1978 and 79. The New York Islanders were cup contenders, but they got bounced in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 1978 by the Maple Leafs, and in 1979 the semifinals against the arch-rivals New York Rangers. A lot of experts says in 78 and 79 New York Islanders were like the team that could have knocked off the Montreal Canadiens from the Stanley Cup championships those years, but it never came to be. A lot of the experts were saying that the New York Islanders were one player away, like kind of a veteran leader, to put them over the hump to be a cup contender, to win a Stanley Cup. And during the trading deadline in 1980, they got the player that put them over the hump. They made a trade to get forward Butch Goring from the Los Angeles Kings, and this was a great move because Butch Goring was like a leader. He was a veteran leader, and he helped the Islanders win the Stanley Cup in 1980. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers in 6 games in the 1980 Stanley Cup Finals to win their first Stanley Cup. Bobby Nystrom scored the game-winning goal in overtime in Game 6. Significant that game, the Game 6 of the New York Islanders Philadelphia Flyers, was the only National Hockey League game that was shown on U.S. network television in the 1980s. CBS broadcast ad, part of the CBS Sports Spectacular. I'll talk about why the NHL was not on network television for so many years and kind of the history of it before 1995 in a future video blog. The Islanders won their first Stanley Cup, and it was smooth sailing from them. They had the best team in hockey during that time. They had Mike Bossy, who was known for goal scoring. Brian Trottier, who was known for putting up a lot of points. Clark Gillies, who was like a physical player and a goal scorer. They had Dennis Potvin, who was the captain. He was a great defenseman. And Billy Smith, who was the first big money goaltender for playoff hockey. he was amazing. And in 1981, Islanders beat the Minnesota North Stars in 5 games to win this second straight Stanley Cup. And in 1982, they beat the Vancouver Canucks in 4 straight games to win the third straight Stanley Cup. The Vancouver Canucks was an under 500 team for the regular season, but they got hot in the playoffs because they had a hot goaltender, Richard Brodeur. He's not related to Martin Brodeur. He was a hot goaltender who stole 3 series prior to the New York Islanders, but the Canucks had no stars on their team, no big offensive stars, so they got swept in 4 straight by the New York Islanders. And in 1983, the New York Islanders beat the Edmonton Oilers in 4 straight games and to win their 4th straight Stanley Cup. The Oilers had Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Yali Curry, and other good players, but they weren't ready to be Stanley Cup champions that year because the Islanders were still good. And the Islanders, during their playoff run in 1983 to win the Stanley Cup Finals, beat the Boston Bruins in 6 games in the Wales Conference Finals. The Boston Bruins had the best record in the National Hockey League in 1982-1983, and they had the hot goaltender who was the Vezina Trophy winner that year, Pete Peters, who many people says if Wayne Gretzky didn't have those offensive years during those years, that Pete Peters could have stole the Hart Trophy from Wayne Gretzky one of those years and stuff like that. And during this time, the New York Islanders were coached by a classic coach, was a legendary Hall of Famer, Al Arbour, and 16 players were on all 4 Cup-winning teams for the New York Islanders. Mike Bossy, Bob Bourne, Clark Gillies, Butch Goring, Andres Curver, Gord Lane, Dave Langgun, Wayne Merrick, Ken Marlowe, Bob Nystrom, Stephen Preston, Dennis Potvin, Billy Smith, Dwayne Sutter, John Tornelli, and Brian Trottier. The winners of the Conn Smythe winners for the Islanders' 4 straight Stanley Cup runs were 1980, Brian Trottier, 1981, Butch Goring, 1982, Mike Bossy, 1983, Billy Smith. Amazing. And also the New York Islanders are the only based U.S. NHL team to win 4 straight Stanley Cups in a row. Amazing. And also, like many of these players with all these cup runs, became Hall of Famers when they retired, first ballot ones. Mike Bossy, Dennis Potvin, Brian Trottier, Billy Smith, Al Arbour, and the other one in the Hall of Fame is Clark Gillies. And there's consideration that they should put John Tornelli or Butch Goring in the Hall of Fame. Also in the United States Hockey Hall of Fame is Ken Marlowe, who's a defenseman, but he was on the U.S. Olympic team. After the Islanders won 4 straight Stanley Cups, they made it to a 5th Stanley Cup, but they got knocked off by the Edmonton Oilers in 1984. They haven't been back to the Cup Finals since, and they made some surprise playoff runs in 1993 to the Wales Conference Finals, but they got bounced by the Montreal Canadiens. It's been 20 years. The Islanders have been going through some hard times, but there's promise they could be back in the swing of things. And with all of these 4 straight Stanley Cups, this put the rivalry with the Rangers and Islanders at a fever pitch. Many fans at Nassau Coliseum, when Rangers came into play, they said 1940, 1940, 1940. Many of the Islanders fans said that to the Rangers fans. the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994, and the first round they knocked out the Islanders in 4 straight games. So what comes around goes around. And the New York Islanders rank up there as one of the best Stanley Cup dynasties of all time, probably behind the Montreal Canadiens, because there's so much of the collection of talent they had during those years in the Stanley Cup runs was outstanding, and I don't think a team's going to win 4 straight Stanley Cups again, in my opinion. That's about it on that. I'll be back later, Facebook friends and YouTube followers, my third and final video blog of the night, which will be about legendary sports announcer, the late, great Charlie Jones. See you later, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Bye now.